Good morning, everybody. Welcome to day 2 of virtual learning. I hope you all enjoyed yesterday. Looks like it was probably a pretty easy day. Most of you got your web quest into me already. Some of you, I sent you a message saying that it wasn't loading, but I think that Google was tired, so it was kind of shutting down for a little bit. So I'm sure it'll be fine. I'll go back and check it tomorrow morning. Obviously, it's nighttime now, so I'm doing this the night before. Anyway, I hope you're having fun. I just talked to some other students that said that one day of virtual learning is making them realize they want to be back in school. So maybe you're getting a new perspective and an appreciation for the fact that school is more than just lessons in the classroom, right? There's a lot of aspects. So we're all missing you, but here's my face. And my dog came to see us again. Anyway, so what I wanted to do is I wanted you to start with that web quest yesterday to kind of ease you into what we're going to be doing. But today I'm going to kind of backtrack a little bit because really covering Pearl Harbor left a little gap in history that I want to fill in before the United States enters the war. So if you have not grabbed your notes already, make sure you have them ready. The nice part of me lecturing like this is if I'm going fast, if you didn't get something, you can back it up, you can pause it, you can do whatever you want. So I don't have a whiteboard anywhere in my house. So instead of projecting like an outline up on the board, what I've done is just anything I normally would have in an outline, you see it here. I've got it on the screen. Okay. And what's that? We'll get started here. So when we ended Schindler's List, we talked about how Germany, whenever they took over land, right, they implemented the Nuremberg laws and the Holocaust existed in those states. Well, the war started because Hitler decided to remilitarize and take over Central Europe. So these maps that I'm showing you shows the effects of a form of war that he fought, which was called Blitzkrieg. Blitzkrieg means lightning war, and it's the way in which Hitler overwhelmed his enemy. What he would do is he would send planes overhead and they would bombard the enemy and just take out all of their defenses. And then the land troops would come in behind them and they would mop up the rest. It was a way to overwhelm the enemy, and it was super effective and super fast. So here you see up at the top, you remember Germany took the Rhineland first, and we did exactly what to stop them? That's right, nothing. Then he went down here, he took over Austria, then he went into Czechoslovakia. We said, stop, no more. We had the Munich Pact, we appeased him, and then he moves into Poland. Now, this is how he started in this dark brown, and by the fall of 1940, look at how Germany has grown. That's all that big yellow there. Now, that's a good question, Emma. Why is Poland cut in half? Mikey, do you remember? Oh, yeah, that's because of the non-aggression pact with Stalin. He and Stalin made frenemies and decided to split Poland and not fight each other. Why was that important? Yes, Manny, he doesn't have to fight a two-front war. Way to go, Hitler. He's a bad man, but he's really good at being bad. So if you were betting, where would you think he would go next? Sydney? You're right. West towards France. So Hitler, after he seizes control of Poland, doesn't have to worry about enemies in the east anymore. So he's going to head west. And what he finds when he heads west is a wall. Yep. So it wasn't Trump's idea first, it was France's. France was so sure Germany was going to come after them again that in the peace that followed World War I, they built a wall. It's called the Maginot Line. The Maginot Line is this red, thick line here. And you'll notice it's the exact size of the border of France and Germany. So the French build this big, elaborate wall. The Germans say, what is that? And they build their own wall. It's called the Siegfried Line, and it's on their western border. So these two lines face each other. And then there are some fortifications up north here because they know that Germany has gone through neutral territory before, but it's not real thick. Okay, it's not real strong. So here's what the Maginot Line looks like. It is a series of very intricate fortifications. You've got machine gun nests up top, artillery pillboxes, which are big like concrete barriers. tank brigades, you've got barbed wire, but then underneath is where the world lives. Okay, so they've got underground hangars for their planes. They've got ways to get troops underground from one part of the Maginot Line to the other. They've got recreation facilities, hospitals. So it is a huge, like, city underground. So they build this big wall. See, that's the earth out there, the land. And then here's the fortifications you can see, but really all the magic is happening behind the wall and underground. And when they built this, they feel secure. Here are some fortifications that still exist of the Maginot Line today. So they feel very secure. They feel very safe. It's kind of like locking a door at your house. You feel safe, right? So what happens when Germany heads west, they come against the Maginot Line. And so they camp out behind the Siegfried Line. The French are behind the Maginot Line. And it looks like we are really going to have a sequel to World War I. We're going to be stuck in trenches, essentially, and it's going to be a long, boring war. This period of time, the winter of 1939, end of 1939, beginning of 1940, is referred to as the Winter of Illusion. It's also called Sitzkrieg, which means sitting war, and it's also called phony war. So it's a time where we're fighting, but no movement is happening. And it looks like, again, it's going to be another stalemate like World War I. But alas, it is not Kaiser Wilhelm in charge. It is Adolf Hitler. And Hitler says, well, if I can't go through it and I can't go under it, I better go over it. I'm going on a bear hunt. And so he is going to take his troops. He's going to use Blitzkrieg. He's going to go north. He's actually going to hit Denmark. He's going to hit the Netherlands. He's going to go through Belgium, and he's going to come crashing into France in the summer of 1940. He comes in with such power. Literally, the people of Paris cannot pack their stuff fast enough. They are sprinting out of the city. This is where the term fleeing French come from, because they run like the wind. And they have good reason, because he's coming after them. So they move into France, and as they move in, many people are going to move south. They're going to run south, and they're actually going to hide out in a southern part of France called Vichy. Vichy, France, is kind of the cultural center of France. If you've ever been to France, northern and southern France are very different. So the Vichy are actually going to make a deal with the devil. They're going to make a deal with Hitler and say, if we support you, will you leave our land untouched? And he agrees. And so Vichy France will actually become part of the Nazi Empire. And the other people who don't do that are going to head west. And here you have the water, right? And they're going to be heading towards a town called Dunkirk. And at Dunkirk are the French soldiers. The French people that are stuck are literally going to get stuck with their back to the English Channel, and they are going to be trapped by the Germans. In the meantime, on June 22nd of 1940, Hitler is going to take the French to a forest called the Forest of Compiègne. Is this familiar? Raise your hand. Yes, you're right, Cami. It is the exact same forest that the Germans were forced to surrender to the French in after World War I. Hitler takes them to the same forest, to the same train car, and they sit them down and they make them surrender. And so on June 22nd of 1940, France surrenders. What? The war just started. It's not even a year old, and Hitler really has no enemies on the mainland. It's a big deal. But the problem is we've got people stuck here trying to get out of France before the Germans take them. Some of you may have seen the movie Dunkirk. Let me show you what happens in Dunkirk. Here it comes. Here it comes. Come on. I think my computer's tired.
What has happened is a colossal military disaster. We shall go on to the end. We shall never surrender.
The call went out. We have to go to Dunkirk. Ready on the stern line.
What are you doing? You know where we're going.
Into war, George.
I'll be useful, sir.
One of ours. He's on me.
I'm on him.
The ship's about to leave.
Down you go.
They need to send more ships. Every hour the enemy pushes closer. They've activated the civilian boats. Civilians? We need destroyers. Where are we going?
Dunkirk.
I'm not going back. If we go, they will die.
You're weekend sailors, not the bloody Navy.
You should be at home.
There's no hiding from this, son. We have a job to do.
Turn it around!
We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall never surrender. We shall never surrender. We shall never surrender.
Where's the bloody Air Force?
Oh. Sorry. Okay, so you get the idea there. So what happened was the British did not want to send destroyers to come get these people and pull them out of France and take them to England because they were afraid the Germans were going to sink all their destroyers and then they would lose the war. So instead, independent merchant marines, people that were traders and things like that, they took their personal boats and they saved the men on the beaches of Dunkirk. They came one by one, picked them up, and took them to England. So as Germany would take over these different countries in Europe, their governments and their heads of state would essentially flee to England. And there in England, we were housing these temporary governments, hoping that they could put them back into place when the war ended, and hopefully we defeated Hitler. So June 1940, France is out of the war. That leaves England, and England is worried. They are now standing alone. Neville Chamberlain has been replaced by one of the just most amazing people in all of history. Aaron, remember when we went to his war rooms? It was special. This is Winston Churchill. He's one of the most quotable people in history. He is now, at this point, the Prime Minister of England. And I have some of my favorite quotes here. Lady Astor was an American that served in Parliament, and she did not like Winston. And she said once, Winston, if I were your wife, I'd put poison in your coffee. Winston said, Nancy, if I were your husband, I'd drink it. Then she said, Winston, you're drunk. He said, yes, I may be drunk, miss, but in the morning I will be sober and you will still be ugly. And he also said, the Americans will always do the right thing after they've exhausted all the alternatives. History will be kind to me, for I intend to write it. And he does. He writes like crazy. And if you're going through hell, keep going. And that is foreshadowing, because that's exactly what's going to happen to the British. So Hitler has taken over Central Europe, and he now has no really powerful enemies on the mainland. And he decides, I've been so successful that it's time for me to take England, because once England falls, everyone is just mine. And so Operation Sea Lion will be the plan to attack England. The problem is England is much harder to attack than France. They've got to pop over some water here. So Hitler has spent a lot of time building up his Luftwaffe, which is his air force. And it is powerful. It's more powerful than any air force in the world at this point. So what he's going to do in the summer of 1940 is he is going to just start bombing England. all of England, but in particular London. He figures if London will fall, the rest of Britain will follow. The people of Britain are actually going to have to dig underground. They use the radio. Winston Churchill, much like his BFF, he's got a real man crush on FDR, which we'll talk about later. He is going to use the radio to talk directly to the people. And that phrase, "we shall never surrender," actually comes from Churchill. He gets on the radio and he says, "It doesn't matter what's happening. We will never surrender. We have the resolve. We will hold on. He can bomb us day and night, but we will not surrender." And that is exactly what happens. He is going to fill the sky with airplanes and just bombard Britain, and expects them to surrender and give up pretty quickly because everyone else has. But he underestimates just how stubborn a British person can be, especially millions of them. So let me just show you this clip super quickly. It's 2 minutes, and then we'll finish up.
What your country can do.
Kennedy has been shot.
It proves to be self-evident that all men are created equal.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
London, September 1940.
Hello, America. This is Edward Murrow speaking from London. There were more German planes over the coast of Britain today than at any time since the war began.
Adolf Hitler was determined to crush the last stronghold in Europe against Nazi Germany. His strategy: bomb England cities and people. During the autumn of 1940, German bombers attacked London night after night for 76 consecutive nights. It came to be known as the Blitz.
What's happening?
20 acres of London was on fire. It's quite a thought, isn't it? A lot of people were killed, a lot of civilians were killed. Because the Germans were determined to bring us to our knees, you see, at all costs.
By the night of September the 14th, when my daughter was born, the docks were alight, London was ablaze. And in fact, the midwife opened the curtains because we got more bright light from London burning than we got from the electric light in the middle of the room.
Throughout England, 43,000 people died. But the British never gave in. In the Second World War of this century, 50 million people would die, nearly half of them civilians. They would die not because they lived near military targets, but because they were the target.
Okay, so
In the first
so Operation Sea Lion will be a defeat for Hitler. It's the first defeat that he endures. He is not going to be successful in taking over England, which is a good thing. Yay, British. But to this day, and Aaron, I don't know if you remember this, but when we were in London this summer, every tour that we were on, they reference the Battle of Britain and what they call the Blitz. It destroyed so many of their cultural centers, civilian homes, civilian lives. People were constantly underground for bomb raids. They have not forgotten this history. And, it is kind of interesting. I was talking to a friend of mine about how we went and voted yesterday and how in the toughest times in our history, voting has always still occurred. And she said that so much of we were talking about how this pandemic thing is really, it's frustrating, right? We understand it's a problem, but it's also interrupting our lives and it's kind of appalling to us. And in my lifetime and yours as well, we haven't had interruptions like that. We've been pretty fortunate for 3 generations. Yes, we've had 9/11, we've had things like that, but not stuff that put us on a lockdown. I've never experienced anything like this. And little perspective, look at this was 5 years almost that people were living like this. So actually longer for some. So we're pretty fortunate, and we just have to keep remembering that. So this war is going to show you that people have endured a lot worse than us, right? So where does that bring the Americans? Well, this brings us back to Pearl Harbor, right? So while all of this is happening, the United States is neutral. We have determined, actually, there was a committee formed in Congress to figure out what it was that brought us into World War II. It's called the Nye Committee. And the Nye Committee determined that the reason the United States entered World War I is for financial reasons, because we were more financially tied. We had more trade with the Allies than we did with the Central Powers. And ultimately, it was that financial tie that pulled us into the war. For that reason, American people say we will never go to war in Europe again. We're not going to send our men to die for money. And so we will pass a series of neutrality acts to prevent us from entering the war. One of them says that we cannot aid a country that is in a declared war. Another says we can't aid a country that is in the midst of a civil war. That was Spain. We cannot trade and sell arms to any country that is at war. And those were the early neutrality acts. But as Hitler takes France, as Hitler starts to attack England, and he's inching closer and closer to us and our friends, we start to alter our neutrality acts a little bit. We start something called a cash and carry, where we will take weapons and supplies to a neutral place, and the Allies, the British, the French, whoever it is, anybody that we think is important to our security can come and buy the stuff from us with cash and take it away. We won't deliver anything to war zones. We also start something called Lend-Lease, and that is where we will lend and lease, so essentially rent weaponry and resources to countries we deem essential to our security. And that country in particular is going to be Britain. Okay, the last thing we do, the last major response that we have, is the Selective Service and Training Act. And you know what that is. You're right, Haley. It's a draft. And Franklin Roosevelt does something that no president before him had ever done. He starts the draft when we are at peace. This is the first American peacetime draft. So we've passed all these neutrality acts. We say we're not getting involved in the war, and then we start building an army. So FDR realizes he realizes it's inevitable. We have to get in. Him and Churchill are meeting constantly, talking constantly. Churchill is begging him to get in, but he knows that war is unpopular among the Americans. The only thing that would make it popular or acceptable is if we were attacked. If someone drops bombs on American soil, then we will get involved in war. And you guys are like, yeah, well, we're really mad at Germany. Where does Japan come from? Well, in your web quest, hopefully you saw where Japan comes from, why that is involved. And for those of you who haven't finished, well, that's what you're going to do the rest of the day. So you see, Americans are ready, kind of. We are prepared in case we have to go to war. So finish your web quest today. It is due by 2:00. Most of you just typed it right on there. That's absolutely perfect. And then submit it on Classroom. And then on Friday, you guys are going to be watching a video, actually one of those Century videos, and completing a worksheet that is all about America entering the war. It's really good. You'll like it. So if you have any questions, I see we're all using Hangouts. If you have not loaded Hangouts onto your phone yet, shame on you. Get on there. That's the quick and easy way to contact me. Even one of you asked a question, and before I could answer it, I think it was Emma answered it for you guys. So, you guys can use each other that way as well. So I hope everyone's doing well. And, I even have my Pearl Harbor shirt on. I don't know if you can see that, and my pajama pants. So, I'm ready for you to learn about Pearl Harbor. I hope you enjoyed my eulogy. So have a good day, and see you soon.